Hello, today we're going to talk about mood disorders, two in particular, major depressive disorder and bipolar disorder. We'll also spend a little bit of time looking at suicide and self-injury. We can easily relate to mood disorders because everybody gets at least a little depressed at one time or another. We feel low, blue, down in the dumps. We may lack energy, have difficulty sleeping, but hopefully the symptoms are mild and they don't last very long. When people develop these kinds of symptoms, though, and they're more severe and they last longer, where they're causing distress and interfering with a person's functioning, they may then be experiencing a mood disorder of the depressed type, and one of those is called major depressive disorder. At the other extreme is mania. When somebody experiences mania, as one person put it, it's like breathless euphoria. The person feels on top of the world. They have a boundless level of energy. Their thoughts are rapid. They talk fast. They may engage in various kinds of impulsive behavior that causes difficulties for themselves and others. And some individuals experience what's called bipolar disorder, where they swing between these periods of depression and mania. I'd like to share with you the story of someone who uh, experienced depression. This story is in your textbook. This woman's name is Greta, and she says this about her experience with depression. Whenever I get depressed, it's because I've lost a sense of self. I can't find reasons to like myself. I think I'm ugly. I think no one likes me. I become grumpy and short-tempered. Nobody wants to be around me. I'm left alone. Being alone confirms that I'm ugly and not worth being with. I think I'm responsible for everything that goes wrong. In her description of her experience when she's depressed, we can see some of the symptoms that are listed on this table that people can experience when they become depressed. Their mood is down. They may lose interest in activities. They may experience changes in their appetite and weight and in their sleep patterns. They may become lethargic, where they lack energy, where they may become physically agitated, where they can't sit still. They may feel listless, like, kind of sort of weak and lacking in energy to do things. They may feel worthless, be down on themselves, hard on themselves. They may feel unwarranted guilt. They may have problems with their thinking, concentration, and making decisions. And they may become preoccupied with death and suicide. In the case of bipolar disorder, as we were saying earlier, the person alternates between periods of depression and mania. And when in a state of mania, they have reduced need for sleep. They tend to become irritable. They may have fewer sexual inhibitions and engage in other kinds of impulsive behavior as well. And there has been an increase in this diagnosis in younger people in recent years. It has been found that women and adolescent girls are more likely to experience clinical depression than adolescent boys and men. People have speculated about some of the possible reasons for this. Nobody really knows for sure, but it is a consistent finding in the literature. Some people think perhaps women are more likely to admit to being depressed than men are, and they may have something to do with it. Also, women may have some additional stressors that they're dealing with in their lives, like, for example, figuring out how to fulfill the various roles that they find themselves in, say as wife, mother, professional, those kinds of things. It does not appear that hormonal differences between men and women account for differences in major depressive disorder in general, but there is one type of major depressive disorder called postpartum depression that does occur following the birth of a baby, and the huge hormonal shifts that occur when a woman gives birth probably have something to do with the experience of that particular kind of depression called postpartum depression. It's also been found that depression runs in families. Bipolar disorder also runs in families. And it's been found that if you are an identical twin and you have a mood disorder, there's a greater likelihood that your sibling will than other siblings you may have. In general, people tend to be more similar to their biological parents than their adoptive parents if they are adopted. And that would include looking at depression as well as other psychological disorders. When people become depressed, there are changes that occur uh, at, at the biological level. Overall activity of their brain is measured by EEG patterns slows down. The reward centers in the brain become less active. There's an undersupply of both norepinephrine and serotonin. When people become manic, their brain activity actually increases, and there seems to be an overabundance of the neurotransmitter norepinephrine in the case of mania. It may also be the case that environment interacts with genes in influencing the expression of mood disorders, similar to what we've talked about before with other disorders. And that, of course, has to do with epigenetics. It has also been found that depressed people tend to have a pessimistic attributional style. They tend to think in ways that repeatedly cause the person to put themselves down, to feel responsible for things over which they do not have control, and to believe that things are not going to get better. Here we can see changes in brain activity looking at a PET scan of somebody who's in a depressed state, in a manic state, and then again in a depressed state. If you recall with PET scans, the areas of the brain that are the most active are red, followed by orange, yellow, green, blue, and finally black. So you can see that when this person is in a manic state, they're much more rapidly consuming glucose, glucose being one of the two sources of energy in the brain, the other being oxygen. The brain really runs on glucose and oxygen. And when they're in a manic state, their brain is much more active than when they are depressed, as you can see. When people develop a pessimistic, depressed way of thinking, they can get trapped in a vicious cycle of thinking where stressful experiences may occur in their lives to which they provide pessimistic attributions, blaming themselves, feeling powerless to do anything about it, feeling worthless. That makes them feel more depressed. And then they have further cognitive and behavioral changes where their thinking may become even worse in the sense of becoming more ingrained in a pessimistic kind of way. Then their behavior may change where they become withdrawn from people and are less likely to reach out for help, which can cause even more stress for them. And you can see how the cycle can just keep repeating itself and getting worse over time. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes when people suffer from mood disorder, they become suicidal. Suicide is also associated with various other psychological disorders, and a person could be suicidal in the absence of any psychological disorder, but it does tend to be associated um, with depression and bipolar disorder as well, both major depression and bipolar disorder. When someone is in a suicidal state, one of the most important things that they need to do is to connect with other people and to talk about what's going on and to get help. Sometimes that help at first needs to be an intervention to protect them from themselves until they reach a non-suicidal state of mind. The sad thing about suicide is that it's a permanent solution to a temporary state of mind. And when somebody is suicidal, they really don't see any other way out. They feel very hopeless. And when they're in that state, they're at an increased risk of doing something harmful to themselves. One of the best things we can do for somebody who might be suicidal is just to listen. It's okay to ask the question. In fact, it's important to ask the question. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Have you thought about how you would do it? And it's important to give them support and be there for them and help others to support them, to mobilize the resources that they have in the way of people in their lives who love them and care about them. And sometimes they may actually need immediate emergency attention to keep them safe, like going into a hospital, for example. We can also connect them with a suicide prevention helpline. And if someone has actually attempted suicide, of course, they need immediate emergency medical intervention. Um, and hopefully they can be saved. And then they're going to need the appropriate kind of psychological help to help them get to a better place. You may be in a position one day to help somebody who's suicidal. I hope you never go through suicidal thinking yourself, but if you do, it's very important to tell other people about it and to ask for help. If a friend were to tell you they were suicidal, but they said don't tell anybody, you really can't honor that request, because somebody in a position to do something about it needs to know about it. People can get over being angry, but they cannot get over being dead. And we need to take it seriously if somebody is considering suicide. Sometimes people also engage in non-suicidal self-injury, like cutting, burning, or hitting themselves. You may know somebody who has done this or is doing this. They may have scratch marks, burn marks, other kind of marks on their body from engaging in non-suicidal self-injury. This is not healthy behavior, obviously, and it needs to be taken seriously if it's going on. And such a person needs to be able to talk with a professional person who can help them sort out what's going on and figure out an alternative to hurting themselves in those ways.